process, and there is much more to build on. The declaration reflects on agreement that equality, freedom and justice are values that drive a thriving society when everyone could experience equal access to opportunities in these domains and any of their choosing. The declaration is a life guide encompassing 30 articles that address rights and benefits which have been realized by many yet outside the reach of others. These include access to education, employment, fair pay, voting rights, healthcare, as well as many others. The values of free speech, privacy and mutual respect, irrespective of gender, race, ethnicity or religion, are evinced by the declaration. It's in line with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the UN Human Rights Defenders Declaration that Defenders was established in 2005 as the East and Horn of Africa Human Rights Defenders Project and registered as a foreign non-governmental organization in Uganda, existing to strengthen the work of human rights defenders in the sub-Saharan region by reducing their vulnerability to the risk of persecution and also by enhancing their capacity to effectively defend human rights. The core mandate of Defenders is to protect the safety, security and well-being of human rights defenders. To achieve this, Defenders' work has to date focused on protection and security management, as well as capacity building, technology development, as well as advocacy, research and communications. We do have the Defenders establishing and supporting national coalitions of human rights defenders in various countries through which human rights defenders can come together and claim their rights at the national level. Broadcasting live on NTV, Defenders brings to you a talk show on the topic, the situation of human rights defenders in Africa. My name is Priscilla Regina Naloga, and my panelists this afternoon are William Leslie Manzuru, environmental human rights defender and team lead of Friends of Zoka. We also are joined by Estella Kabachwezi, advocacy, research and communications manager at Defenders. Follow the conversation online with the hashtag UDHR75 on the X app, that is at NTV Uganda, and Defenders. Also streaming live on YouTube at NTV Uganda. We are very thankful for you joining us this afternoon. Now turning to my panelists and welcoming them to the program. Estella, I'll start with you. You're most welcome.
Thank you very much, Regina. It's an honor and pleasure to be here.
William?
Thank you. It's a honor and really a great pleasure for me to be here.
All right. Now, of course, as we go on, we're looking to the significance of two milestones in the state of the human rights defenders in Africa. For starters, I would like to turn to you, Stella. What is Defenders and African Defenders? What do they do? What's the mandate? And what are the works in your perspective?
Okay. Thank you very much, Regina. Defenders is a regional non-governmental organization that was founded in 2005 to protect human rights defenders, reduce the risk of vulnerability to persecution, and of course enhance their capacity to effectively carry out their human rights work. I think to give a very brief background to how Defenders was founded, an extensive research was conducted by our Executive Director, Hassan Shire, that sought to look into the protection needs of human rights defenders in East and West Africa. Some of the key findings that evolved out of that research illustrated, one, that there was insufficient collaboration among neighboring African countries, especially where human rights defenders had to flee repressive regimes. Instead of seeking refuge in Africa, many of them were found to flee to Europe and the Americas. I'll come back to this because it's of significance, importance to our work. And then the limited resource constraints as well had a profound effect on the effectiveness of the work of human rights defenders. The other key finding was that human rights defenders lacked sufficient skills and knowledge on human rights instruments and existing protection mechanisms. And lastly, there was a need for the international community to support human rights defenders at national level. So Defenders was founded to meet these protection gaps and has since 2005 worked to ensure that we address these gaps that were identified in this research. How do we do it? Of course, you said protection is our core mandate. So we come into, we do emergency protection, removing human rights defenders from the risky situation that they're in, addressing that situation and ensure that they continue their work safely and effectively. Of course, this is determined on a case-by-case basis. It will range from anything to psychosocial support, legal support, relocation, supporting beneficiaries. So again, it's dependent on the case the human rights defender is facing at that time. We also do a lot of capacity building, as you said. The goal behind this is to enhance the skills of human rights defenders, to allow them be knowledgeable about the human rights environment, to be able also to conduct their work effectively. We also enhance their digital skills. They should be safe online as well as offline. We do a lot of advocacy work. Given the nature of our organization, it's a regional organization, so we do not have physical presence in each of the countries that we work in. By the way, we work in 12 countries in Eastern Horn of Africa. So our advocacy is centered on regional and international human rights platforms. So we do a lot of work with the African Union human rights mechanisms, particularly the African Commission on Human and People's Rights and the United Nations human rights mechanisms, including the United Nations Human Rights Council. So that's Defend Defenders. So in 2009, it was realized that there was need to have to replicate a similar protection program in Eastern Horn of Africa across the continent. So human rights defenders convened 10 years after an all-African human rights conference that was held in Johannesburg in 1998. So 10 years later, they convened here in Kampala to take stock of the conversations that had happened in Johannesburg then in 1998 and see what was the situation prevailing like for human rights defenders. Then in 2009, it was realized that networks had a fundamental role to play in enhancing protection of human rights defenders. So some networks were existing at that time in Africa. We had a network in West Africa, we had one in Central Africa, we had one as well in East Africa. So these existing networks then came in to share their experiences on how they were carrying out protection work for human rights defenders. So at the conclusion of this convening in Kampala, a declaration that is called Kampala Plan of Action. The declaration dissolved that a continent-wide network should be established that would oversee protection of human rights defenders on the continent, and that's how African Defenders was born. Okay. So African Defenders has a continent-wide eye, and Defend Defenders does focus its work in East and Horn of Africa sub-region.
Okay, so how does one get to classify themselves as a human rights defender, and what would be their duties and responsibilities? Okay,
that's an interesting question. I would not necessarily call it a classification, because when you classify it, then you create structures. But when you go into the definition of who a human rights defender is, I'll draw from the definition of the United Nations Human Rights Defenders Declaration that simply says a human rights defender is anyone who individually or in a group works to or seeks to protect and promote the human rights as we know them. Okay, so anyone that's working to protect the right to education, protect or conserve natural forest cover, speaking out on participation, association, by virtue of that work, then you are classified as a human rights defender. However, the work that you're doing must be of peaceful nature.
Okay, all right. Well, Stella did work with evidence-based approach.
Exactly.
William Leslie Manzuru is joining us, and he's an environmental human rights defender, and he's the lead at Friends of Zoka. William, first of all, how did you get into the space of human rights defense?
Oh, thank you. First, I did not know whether I was a human rights defender until I received calls from some people who work to defend human rights defenders, provide us with a safe space. Very specific, those who work at Defend Defenders. Okay, that was the moment then I realized that, okay, so the work I do is of human rights, defenders. but previously I had no knowledge of it. What I knew was I'm just trying to do this for the benefit of my community, but also for my own benefit.
Okay.
But then in terms of its classification, how is it called, was not any knowledge.
Was not something you had an idea about.
Exactly.
But you had an idea about what you were doing and you were defending your community. Tell us about Friends of Zoka.
Yeah, Friends of Zoka is what I could call a national NGO by now, but we started as a community movement. And we started, interestingly, by the way, on WhatsApp. Okay? So meaning we use the digital space to give us an identity. How did we start? By the time we came together, we have a forest called Zoka Central Forest Reserve.
At what point in time is this?
This was in 2016.
2016, okay.
Okay, yes. A forest called Zoka Central Forest Reserve located in Adjumani. This forest was going through immense, illegal activities inside. Illegal logging, timber business, and commercial charcoal trade. But then the most interesting part was that nobody seems to know what was happening, okay? And the communities were not seeing the benefit of these distractions. So what did we do? We decided to come together. And one Sunday, I went and I spoke to the priest whether an announcement could be made in the church for people to come for a meeting. And the priest accepted, announcement was made, people converged and started asking questions, and we are like, what is happening? Who do we ask? And how do we ask the questions the people want to ask? Then we realized that these things are quite difficult, to undergo. So we created a WhatsApp group, named it Friends of Zoka. In the process, we then started asking the questions, okay, on the WhatsApp group. Like if we realize that the person who is doing the logging is connected to you or to a powerful member of the society, okay, we write this on the WhatsApp, okay, and then we put the pictures there, and we'll be seeking for accountability from the perpetrators. So that's how Friends of Zoka, virtually started. But then when we went deeper to analyze how these things were done, it was quite intriguing that the leaders to whom we are reporting, seeking for accountability or believing that they will come to our aid, were the very people behind these distractions, okay? And these were people, seated in offices of like the RDCs, offices like of DPC, political offices within the district. So it became a bit difficult for us to maneuver and get really, a sense of response from them.
Yes.
So this then kept us on, and it kept us on. That is virtually the birth of Friends of Zoka. Just we thought it was maybe a 1 day or 2 days activity, but then it kept us to date.
Okay.
Yes.
Estella mentioned something about your work being peaceful is how it's recognized as human rights defending work. What are those peaceful activities that you had in order to defend the forest?
Yes, one of the most peaceful activities we have is community dialogue, okay? We are premised on capacity building of community, so that communities can raise this matter, communities can ask questions, okay, to their leaders. The most immediate leadership, starting from the LC1 up to top. But also, what we do is we also create a sense where we partner with some group of journalists, okay? Why do we need to do this? Because we need the journalists to help us to unearth these stories. And it is these stories that will help us, in terms of our advocacy spaces. And it is also these stories that will help us, design what we call, like position papers when you are presenting things like in Kampala or in the local districts where I come from. But also then we decided to go ahead and also liaise with the local community, the cultural institutions. We had numerous meetings and engagements with the cultural institutions across the region, including from Acholi up to, the greater West Nile. But also we decided to partner with the religious institutions because we felt that these are huge institutions that have huge followers, okay? And in all these spaces, our essence is to negotiate for a space of discussion, a space of dialogue, okay? Where you bring together like what you call the area managers of these, gazetted areas, so that they can tell us exactly what is happening. But also then we decided to move outside the space a bit by having, routine community debates, both in schools and for out of school.
Yeah.
What is the essence of this debate? You see, the essence of this debate is to make sure that community urge is driven. Okay, the young people are involved in the spaces. Okay, they are not merely consumers of the decision we make, but they are also designers of the decisions that must be made. Okay, then we also went ahead to do now what we call commonly community movement building. The essence of this community movement building is that you empower the community so that they can be in position to take these matters head on. They can be in position, one, to document, but also two, to look into the nitty-gritties of what is needed, okay? So that this then gives them the power, to hold accountable whoever comes to abuse these natural resources. And I can proudly say that we have built community movements across Western Nile, but also another thing that we now saw that happened is our activities has instigated a lot of community concerns across the region and also across the country.
And also what has been registered as indicators of the success movement of Friends of Zoka, both on community and national level?
Yes, one of the most success stories that to date we talk about is the district where I come from in Adjumani. In the last political circle, the issue of Zoka Central Forest Reserve was at the peak of every elective position's agenda. Okay, for me that takes it home, that you have a political season where the decision, where the discussion, where everyone is using Zoka Central Forest Reserve as a catchment. Okay, then two, also by the fact that the president has issued quite many statements on Zoka Central Forest Reserve based on the evidences and then the work that we have been doing. For me, this takes it key. Okay, the issue of Zoka has not only been discussed in Adjumani or in Western Nile or in Northern region, but even at the power centers here in Kampala. And this tells us a lot about the activities we have been doing. But also, excuse me, sometime back we received what you call a ministerial moratorium that banned transportation, sales and dealings in Afzeli africana tree species and also cyanate tree species. This also came as a result of the work we kept doing. And the most recent one is the presidential executive order on the charcoal. The media angle of our activities scored a lot. How did it score a lot? Because it gave space and it created, an area where people read about Zoka, people read about what we do. The investigations have exposed many people, including like people at the regional level in our security coffers, people at the district level in our security coffers, but also people at central level in our security coffers. And I think this also led to, many military declaration. Like if I can tell you, one army general was posted to go to Zoka and find out exactly what was happening. During the term of Dr. Wakana Rugunda, 4 ministers were sent to go for fact-finding in Zoka Central Forest Reserve to understand exactly what was happening. And I think these are where the scores is. And how did these scores come? Exactly just like what he said. In all our activities, we are non-violent. Okay? Because we believe the principle of being non-violent is the key, the biggest key. And you see, it's the biggest tool for any kind of engagement. And that's why from the time go to date, we have quite scored enormous, okay? The issue of Zoka and the issue of Friends of Zoka now has gone past at a national level. Okay. Like in 2018, defenders recognized our work and he made very specific my identity to be the human rights defender of the month. That was the month of November in 2018. But also the European Union delegation in Uganda recognized the work that we did, okay? And he gave us an award, but through my identity, that was in 2019, okay? And also that then created a lot of space for us to engage at international levels, okay? Issues of Zoka Central Forest Reserve have been spoken at COPs. It has been spoken at many, national and international engagements. And all this is taken back to the downtrodden people, the communities that we led, by the fact that they stood, they stood firm amidst many of the challenges that they face.
Speaking of challenges, William, I know that security is one of the biggest challenges of human rights defenders, and by your submission, you were dealing with quite some serious positions of power. What was the state of your security throughout these 7 years of defense under Friends of Zoka?
Yeah, this is quite a good question, but you see, at times answering it makes it a bit emotional. Okay. Defenders first came to our rescue in Adjumani when situation was not really good, because we are fighting left and right. We are running battles with the military just on issues of conservation. Okay, I can tell you, down home I have been arrested quite many times, but then interestingly, all my arrest stops at the police station. Okay, it does not proceed to courts of law, because I don't know why. I think they just virtually do not have a lot of evidence. We have gone through a lot of threats. We have gone through surveillance, you know. Some of our communications are surveilled for no good reason, okay? Personally, my house has been broken into many times, and now these days I take it as a normal thing, okay, for someone to get into my house. I have virtually lost friends, not because they are dead, but because they are told people like William are not worth to be followed in our society, okay? They are denting the identity of our society. So I've lost friends through that, okay? But also, most painfully, just like last week, okay, around 6 people lost their lives, okay, on issues of Zoka and East Mali Wildlife Reserve. These are quite painful moments, because when you get back, you see the relatives of these guys will ask you. For example, some of them will ask me, you are here alive, okay, but ours is gone. So you can imagine what kind of reflection you get in all this. But then, including my colleagues, some of my colleagues were beaten, you know, some of my colleagues are being harassed, you know, and then when you look at also the kind of community challenges that people go through. One of our informers in the community, his house was burned twice. But to date, there is no much investigation onto who is doing this and why these things are being done. Excuse me. The challenges are quite enormous. But you know, for us now, what takes it home is when you have organizations like Defenders, okay, that are just a stone throw away. The day I met the executive director of Defenders, you know, he has a huge profile. Then when I look at myself, sitting with him, eating with him, I've actually lost human conscience, because he is...
You lost your human right to be human.
Exactly, you know, because he is a huge identity, but by the fact that he had humility, okay, to accept me in my position, to talk to me, to interact with me, it's a huge motivation to do
and that's community.
Exactly.
Estella, it's profound that we hear the story of William Leslie at such a time as this significant day, in particular, is the Human Rights Day internationally being observed. Talk to us about that day, because I know that it has, this year 2023 is quite pivotal in terms of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Thank you. It's actually difficult to speak after William, because his crime was simply to protect the environment. He was speaking on behalf of Friends of Zoka does work to conserve the forest. So being persecuted for protecting the environment is shameless. It's not right. So today, I'll start with today. Today is actually International Human Rights Defenders Day. This day, 50 years ago, is when the United Nations Human Rights Defenders Declaration was proclaimed and adopted in Paris. And as Amanzuru was saying, our Executive Director Hassan was present at this moment, I mean, to witness this significant landmark in history, because this instrument in itself is very important, because it legitimizes our work. It legitimizes what Amanzuru is doing. It gives a voice. It not only legitimizes our work, but also sets standards and protections that human rights defenders are entitled to in the course of their work. But also that it sets out duties that states must adhere to. what Uganda should respect and protect and promote those rights that we're speaking about. So it's a very important instrument, and today we celebrate 50 years of its existence, 50 years of it giving a voice to human rights defenders. International Human Rights Day will be celebrated tomorrow, 10th December, which is when the Universal Declaration of Human Rights actually celebrates its 75 years. So tomorrow is the actual 75th anniversary of the UDHR. You listed at the beginning of this conversation the 30 articles. What this instrument has gone on to do is set standards on how humankind or human beings should be treated, because if you go back to the history of the UDHR, it was proclaimed at a time when the world had witnessed grave atrocities stemming out of the Second World War, and the aspirations behind this instrument was that we should never again see such kind of atrocities being committed. And this UDHR stresses in its preamble that that only when dignity, equality, and inalienable rights for all humankind are recognized is when you will see this recognition of dignity, inalienable and equal human rights is the foundation of a just and free and peaceful world. So this instrument has gone on to inspire over 70 regional and international instruments, including also national level instruments. If you look at our constitution, our 1995 constitution, if you look at our chapter 4, you would see that the human rights that are guaranteed under chapter 4 under our Bill of Rights are draw inspiration from the 30 articles of the UDHR. So these instruments are very important. We need to take ownership of them, because we learn how to treat humans. We learn that every individual is born equal, is born free, and there are entitlements that we are given just by virtue of being human.
All right, last evening there was an event in recognition of these days, Defenders hosting it, commemorating the 75 years of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights and of course the 25 years of the UN Declaration on Human Rights Defenders. So we want to know, what's the relationship between Defenders and these two instruments directly?
Oh, well, first of all you would see our organization is also, we're also human rights defenders, right? So these two instruments inspired the formation of Defenders. In the beginning, I talked about the extensive research that was done by Hassan at that time to identify the protection gaps. Out of that research is when the organization was born. But if you look at the work that we're doing, we're working to give life to the articles of the UN Declaration on Human Rights Defenders. Our work is simply to protect human rights defenders, to give them a voice, to ensure that they continue their work safely and safely and effectively. Because these rights as we know them in the UDHR are not self-implementing, okay? There have to be people that are going to come out to defend them, to promote them, and to protect them. So when these people come up, they more often than not face backlash. You see, William, Friends of Zoka, was attacked or faced backlash because they decided to conserve the environment. So human rights defenders who are working to give life to the articles of the UDHR also need protection. So that's why organizations like Defenders, African Defenders, that's why we exist, to ensure that our human rights defenders can continue this crucial work in a safe and in a safe environment.
All right, and one of the ways Defenders as well as African Defenders have come together to promote and protect the work of human rights defenders across the continent is through extensive research in which they have compiled a report looking back the impact of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the UN Human Rights Defenders Declaration on the work of human rights defenders in Africa. Now, this book was also released yesterday evening on that very event. One of the things that stood out for me in particular was the national mechanisms, and I want to find out from you, Estella, for us, for example, in Uganda, what are those national mechanisms that have been stipulated to provide valuable support and advocacy to the likes of William?
Okay. Uganda has, if you look at our legal framework, we have a good, I would say, progressive and a good legal framework right from our constitution in chapter 4 that sets out and guarantees our human rights and protections. The challenge is with the implementation and safeguarding of these human rights as we know them. Our constitution also provides for the establishment of a national human rights institution that is supposed to monitor and report on the human rights situation in the country. This institution is ideally a constitutional body. It should be independent and it should function to meet, to monitor, report and seek redress for victims of human rights violations. But we continuously see we continuously see a challenge, we continuously see issues of selective implementation of laws. We continuously see also a situation where we have weak institutions that do not come out to strongly protect and defend human rights as we know them. We see a very strong culture of impunity, where we see human rights violations continue unabated. So there are very many, there are key issues that needs to be addressed in the country to be able to realize the aspirations that we committed to. Because if you see the UDHR, for instance, I'll draw back to the UDHR, it inspired subsequent regional and international treaties. For instance, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. All these regional and international instruments, Uganda has ratified and adhered to. Simply, that simply means is that they have agreed to be bound by the human rights, I mean to be bound by their obligations to fulfill these rights. So they should be working towards that. I mean, you've made that commitment at international level, then why shouldn't you go ahead to implement your aspirations or your commitments? So there is need to enforce. The question is always the will, the political will to actually enforce and implement these aspirations, the need to strengthen our national institutions, to make them function independently and ensure that human rights as laid out, as set out in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights are respected, protected and promoted. You speak of national, and in this very same report, looking back, you do have established national coalitions and sub-regional networks. I believe, William, you've been a very good beneficiary of these coalitions and networks. And in regards to the promotion of protection needs on the continent, can you speak into that?
Yeah, first, I am a beneficiary and a sole beneficiary from these networks, and the networks include defenders. There is National Coalition for Human Rights Defenders that brings together all organizations working around human rights issues. Inside there you have organizations like Chapter 4 that provides legal services and others, but also it goes back like where I come from. There are a lot of human rights issues, so Friends of Zoka does referral of some of these cases to the National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders, but also to defenders. And most times our referrals have been, addressed. They have been really looked into. Many of the people we have referred have gotten, redresses from these institutions. But also, you see, it is through these institutions that people like me now speak at World Liberty Congress. At World Liberty Congress, I sit as the Secretary for Sub-Saharan Africa. How did this come about? Because at the national level here, we've been having quite a lot of engagements, some of these engagements are on national platforms, others at regional platforms. And it is through these engagements that the little we speak kept building on. So it led us to have this, you know, the Africa, the continental level of engagement. Like when I was in Vilnius this year for World Liberty Congress, one thing that I did was to try to speak to my African colleagues, and I asked them, do you know defenders? Okay? Over 90% of the colleagues who were there said, yes, we know defenders. And the second question I asked them is, have you gotten any benefit from defenders? I realized over 70%. So I decided to use that to leverage, you know, my position, to leverage my ideals for the position that I'm holding now. You see, now this tells you how these, you know, the institutions have come together to help human rights defenders, very specific in Africa. And back home where I come from, you see, there are journalists who come in conflict not with the law, but with the perpetrators. There are those who are beaten, there are those who are locked up, and the rest of it. But we make referrals, okay, and they get the benefits. But also there are those human rights defenders who speak out on the wrongs of what happens in their society. They are victimized, okay? Some of them are interdicted. Okay, what do? We need to look into the essence of, if so and so is interdicted, why is this person interdicted? Okay, we cannot address these things at Friends of Zoka, but what we do is at the national platform we make referrals so that people get benefits. There are those who are, you know, arrested for speaking the truth on radios, and at the end of the day you need to link them up for other services. Okay. So those are some of the direct beneficiaries that we have been getting, but also you know, provision of trainings, provision of capacity buildings to most of the HRDs down at the grassroots is being done by the institutions at the central level here, by the institutions also at the regional level. Like Friends of Zoka also benefits from the Human Rights Foundation of United States of America. How did this come about? Through connections of defenders. Okay. So it's quite a huge basket where we partake of the benefits that this basket has. So any challenge you look into, then you peep into the basket. If this is my challenge, who can address it? So that's the beauty of this kind of, you know, coordination.
I now understand why William got the job. Follow the conversation on the hashtag UDHR75 on NTV Uganda, that is on the X app, as well as Defend Defenders, still on the X app. And you can also share the link with your friends. YouTube link is just type in NTV Uganda and you'll be able to share this conversation of defense, human rights defenders. Now, of course, stemming from last night equally, Uganda benefited from the works of this man, Dr. Jimmy Sentongo, having been awarded a prestigious award of Most Outstanding Human Rights Defender of the Year 2023. We all remember the pothole exhibition and the health exhibition, focusing on Ginger City, and how these two exhibitions actually brought the attention up to the head of state to see and ask questions. And later on, some, you know, monies were moved here and there. The Ministry of Health also moved to work things here and there to just rectify the situation, for which we're very grateful for him. But he also revealed in his address last evening that his security is threatened. Unknown callers. He has been summoned to some powerful officers, threatening his life and that of his family. So basically, public domain for him has become very difficult. And in that regard, how do you equip such a human rights defender to defend themselves, Estella?
That has different components of protection that we were talking about. I'll start with, because he mentioned unknown callers, issues to do with surveillance, digital aspects. One question to ask is, how safe are you? How safe is your information online? How strong is your password? Is your phone updated? It's also very important for human rights defenders to take their digital security very, very, very seriously. So organizations like ours also work to enhance and ensure that human rights defenders also stay safe online. But also we have, as we have been talking about, national coalitions for human rights defenders that we have gone on to support their establishment across the continent. In Uganda, we have the National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders that also seeks to extend protection support to human rights defenders. So the first point of contact would be for human rights defenders like Dr. Jimmy to get in touch with the protection service for service providers that are available through the National Coalition, through Defend Defenders, to explain the risks, to discuss the situation, and only when we've had that discussion can we be able to advise on the protection intervention. Because in the beginning of this conversation I said our protection interventions are not one shoe fits all. You know, every case is determined on its merits. So until he gets in touch is when we can be able to advise what protection needs can be advanced to support. But our protection line, our protection services are available to human rights defenders. Our only interest is that you are doing human rights work and you're doing it in a peaceful manner. So for us, that's the only box that you need to check. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Recognition was also given to other Ugandans for their human rights defense. The one included William Makabo Achol, who won the Outstanding Human Rights Defender of Northern Uganda, Peter Ogik for Eastern Uganda, Winfred Mugambwa for Central Uganda, as well as Joy Chalimpa for Western Uganda. Winfred Mugambwa was for Central Uganda. Now, there was also a comment that I found quite intriguing from the Executive Director of the National Coalition for Human Rights Defenders, Mr. Robert Chirenga. He said Parliament is to enact the Human Rights Defenders Protection Law 2022 because it always finds a lot of challenges in their working environment. What is this policy and the principles in this bill, Estella?
Okay, so Uganda, I think the process of enacting, of having a human rights defenders law traces back to 2015. We have had several bills that are trying to domesticate the human rights defenders declaration. So the idea behind having a human rights defenders law is to have the declaration domesticated, define who a human rights defender is, set out the rights of the human rights defender, the protection mechanisms, as well as the duties and responsibilities of the state. That law, as far as I know, has been shelved. Some progress was made in the 9th Parliament. It was brought before the House to be discussed, but once there was a change in members of Parliament, because it was a private members bill, the process had to start afresh. So ideally, having a human rights defenders law would legitimize the work of human rights defenders in the country. But as we speak right now, we don't have the law yet. There are still conversations happening and trying to have Parliament discuss it and pass it as a law. So we currently have no local or national framework specifically protecting and guaranteeing the rights of human rights defenders.
All right. In the event that it's passed, William Leslie, what would this law protection bill actually protect you against?
You see, in many spaces and in many engagements, human rights defenders are called anti-government. Okay, we are labeled as if we are driving foreign interest. Okay, we are driving foreign agenda. We don't need development. All these wrong things are associated with human rights defenders, just because the space does not have legal identity, as he says. But I think this legal identity one will give us, a fair understanding of who we are, but also a fair recognition of the kind of work we do. Because even down in the community, by the way, if you say you're a human rights defender, communities don't understand. What are you defending, for example, okay, down in the community? So I think if this bill becomes a law, it will address many of these things. But also, it will be needful for it to give us our response mechanism in case we have, challenges with in case we face threats, okay? It will also outline to us point of services, okay? Where do we run for services? Where do we get service A or service B? But for me, I think the overall is, if this law is passed, it will give an opportunity, especially for Ugandans, to understand that human rights work is not a criminal work, okay? We are not running against the state, neither running after the state. But in fact, in a very beautiful form, we are helping the state to realize that there are a lot of things that we need to do together, okay? Like if we did not raise the issue of Zoka Central Forest Reserve, by this time the forest will be gone, okay? And that will have really, really denting impact on the local communities around where this forest is. So these are the most immediate benefits of human rights defenders. Like you gave an example of Dr. Jimmy Setongo, okay? When he raised the issues of the pothole, the issues of ginger and the rest of it, these issues were addressed. But is he the only beneficiary? No. It's benefiting many Ugandans.
45 million Ugandans.
Exactly. So that's the benefit if we have this law in power, okay? It will really ease our work. It will make us, have a fair space of engagement, okay? We will not be walking in hiding. We will be walking when our heads are high because, what you are doing is legitimate, okay? It's well recognized.
In the absence of this direct law, Esteli, is there any other relative law that comes in hand to protect the works of William and Friends?
I said in the beginning we have quite we have a framework that does exist. We have various regional and international human rights instruments that we have adhered to. I think it's important to also know that the Human Rights Defenders Declaration in itself does not create new rights or new responsibilities or obligations. It's drawn from the UDHR, it's drawn from other existing international treaties. So we have the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, Uganda ratified. We have the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights that Uganda has ratified. We have the Covenant on Social, Economic and Cultural Rights. We have a constitution. We have various policies. So not having a particular law to protect human rights defenders should not be an excuse, because we are guided. We have a framework. We have a framework of laws and policies that guide human rights work.
All right, let me tweak that up a little bit. With the subscriber countries to defend defenders, which is a country that has actually this law active, and how has it changed the face of human rights defending in that country?
Okay, I think West African countries have a few West African countries, Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, have gone on to have to domesticate the HRD declaration, and also DRC very, very recently. So what this means is that human rights defenders in these countries have guaranteed protection, because the work that they're doing is recognized in the body of laws of these countries, and as a result their voices could be heard. But also, having a law in itself doesn't mean that is not an automatic guarantee that because you have a human rights defenders law, then persecutions of human rights defenders are going to stop. No, it goes beyond having the law. It's about implementation of the law. It's about sensitization of what the law means. It's about every stakeholder owning that law, owning their duties, owning their responsibilities, to be able to have a wholesome picture.
All right. William, in the absence, in the presence of these two instruments, and for by and large Africa, if we can speak so, how can we actually better popularize them to protect human rights defenders?
Yeah, I think one of the ways of popularizing them is through having such engagement. I'm sure there are quite many people who are viewing this program, okay? By the fact that they are listening to, they will pick interest to understand more. But also, another way could also be like, can we institutionalize it into our teaching institutions, okay? Put it as a subtopic or a topic in our teaching institutions so that it becomes widely engaged on. And also, you know, can we have, you know, what I could say, primary interpretation of these things in our local languages so that people can have easy access to it, okay? But another thing could also be like, can we have it to be a cross-cutting issue, okay? I remembered when this country was fighting HIV and AIDS, it made HIV and AIDS a cross-cutting issue. So can we make sure that these are cross-cutting issues for any engagement that you are going to have? Can you have some few minutes to talk about it? You know, but then also very key for me is how does this kind of information reach the society? For example, where I'm coming from, okay? We need to amplify our media engagements, okay? Can the media take it upon, you know, and then really have a lot of conversation centered around it? Okay. That way, in my opinion, you know, it will have a better, you know, space of engagement and also space of the knowledge base that can reach community, but also reach the wider, you know, area of the people. Yeah.
Estelle, with your experience of defenders, exactly what are the gaps that have been identified between the promise of the two instruments and the reality on ground?
I think I have already alluded to some of these. The most important one, or for me the one that is at the top of my list, is the lack of political will, okay? Because to move these aspirations into a reality, you have to have the will of the state, because the state bears the primary responsibility to protect, promote and guarantee the rights as we know them. So we lack political will, so implementation of these declarations then just remains on paper. The other gap that we identified is the absence of institutions. And this is not just a problem in Uganda, but you see it as a problem across Africa. Strong institutions. If you look at the status of the judiciary, how independent is the judiciary? How independent are your national human rights institutions? If you go back to look at the statistics of the ratings of national human rights institutions globally, even that has been questioned of late. So the absence of strong institutions to protect, to own these rights and ensure that in case there are violations, victims or survivors of human rights violations have where to seek redress, is the only way we can address the prevailing culture of impunity. Impunity is really a problem.
All right. We also do have the Ubuntu Hub cities. Tell us more about those.
So from the results of one of the key findings from the research, as I alluded to earlier, was the insufficient collaboration between African states, where we had human rights defenders fleeing from one repressive regime to another. It was difficult for them to resettle on the continent, so most of them were either being exiled in Europe or in the Americas. The impact of this was that Africa was losing its strong human rights defenders, its seasoned experts. So there was need to have a relocation program on the continent that would be able to allow human rights defenders in Africa at risk to relocate within Africa to stay safe, but also continue doing their work. So Ubuntu Hub Cities initiative was founded in 2019. We currently have 8 cities. We have 3 cities in Southern Africa, that's Pretoria, Johannesburg and Cape Town. We have in Praia, Cape Verde, Abidjan, in Cote d'Ivoire. We have Accra in Ghana, Tunis, in Tunisia, and then we also have Kampala here. So human rights defenders are relocated. Of course, human rights defender from you'll be relocated to where you can continue to do your work safely and securely. Okay. And the purpose of these hub cities is that it eases the resettlement process of these human rights defenders. It reduces the cultural shock and also allows for easy integration into the country. So that's a brief background behind Ubuntu Hub Cities initiative.
Right. William Leslie,
Yes.
what is your message to the human rights defender who's watching this program this evening?
Yes, my message to the human rights defender watching this program is let's continue doing our work, okay? Non-violent. Let's continue engaging peacefully. But also let's continue seeking for accountability. Let's create spaces where we can engage in dialogue, okay? Spaces where we can engage in research. But also, above all, is let's listen to community voices, because that is the voice that gives us the power to do the work that we are doing. And I will also say that I know it's quite a challenging time to speak about human rights issues at this particular moment. But as Stella said, there are quite many institutions here that provides, protection, provides spaces where if you are in conflict either with the law, if you are threatened, or if you face other kind of challenges, you will always have a space to tell your story where your story can get a platform for redress.
Okay.
So for me, this is quite encouraging to many human rights defenders that we are not alone in the struggle. There are quite many people who are, looking at us across the continent, but also at a global space. So it is important for us to engage, but non-violently, okay? But also differentiate between our personal and also the community voices for me.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Estella, it's close to 2 decades of defenders on the African continent, East Horn of Africa. What's the continued mandate and commitment?
Our mandates will stay the same. We'll continue to support human rights defenders to enhance their capacity to carry out their work safely and securely. And of course, we envision a region within which the human rights of all individuals, as stipulated in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, are recognized and protected.
All right. Well, she did mention something. When will they never be again? So it begs the question, when will that time come when there'll never be again atrocities towards human rights defenders? Well, it's a big question, and over time we pray that we ever get that answer through the works of William Leslie Amanzuru, environmental human rights defender and team leader of Friends of Zoka, as well as other human rights defenders, Estella Kabatwezi, advocacy, research and communications manager at Defend Defenders. We want to say thank you so much for having been a part of this conversation, trusting that it's been illuminating. And in conclusion, together, let's rejuvenate the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, demonstrate how it can meet the needs of a time, as well as advance its promise of freedom, equality, and justice for all. My name is Priscilla Regina Naloga. Good evening.